समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Hello and welcome to a fresh new episode of Geopolitics with Swasti, where Swasti Rao, our consulting editor for strategic and international affairs, takes your questions, dear subscribers, on geopolitical developments around the world. Swasti has just come back from Prague, so welcome back, Swasti. And I know there has been a delay, but we get back to our episode, and a lot has been happening. And the top thing on everybody's mind is the visit of the Afghani foreign minister here in India. Starting with that, I will begin with a question by Ravi Rules, who says that should India provide any meaningful air defense or air force systems to Afghanistan under the Taliban, or even provide military aid equipment in order to cultivate Afghanistan as a military or a defense partner?
Now, it's a good question, Ravi. And see, India, there is no doubt about the fact that India must have strategic depth in Afghanistan, and India has many interests, okay, there. And if you read like my latest column and many other, I think, scholars have written about why Afghanistan continues to be so important. And in fact, everybody has appreciated the fact that India has come of age. India is now blurring its red lines because of strategic considerations. Now, that's one part. So, upgrade in our ties is one part. The second part is that considering the fact that Afghanistan and Pakistan are constantly now at a low intensity conflict, especially around the Durand line, and that was also that was something that coincided with Mutaqi's visit here in India as well. Now, your question is that should India provide military assistance or military training or air defenses? I honestly don't think India going that far, because India has still not established diplomatic relations, full diplomatic relations with the Taliban. That's the first part. The second is that that region is fairly contested. And one thing that you have to understand, and not just you, I think, Devdatta, that is something that many Indians should understand, is that Taliban comes to India to balance against Pakistan is one thing. Taliban comes to India to sort of keep its options open is another thing. But we also have to study carefully how Taliban plays all sides.
Absolutely.
So it would be very, very naive on our part to imagine that we are the only ones that Taliban keeps running to every time they have a problem. That's not the case at all. Taliban have excellent relations with China. In fact, the China-Pakistan-Afghanistan trilateral has already met formally, I think more than 2 times, 3 times, especially this year as well. So you have to keep that in mind. China will never let this particular conflict go to a level that sort of completely gets out of control and balance. It will always keep it somewhere controlled, even though the conflict is there. The Durand line is an imaginary line, and Pakistan is recognized as Afghanistan doesn't recognize it, as Taliban especially doesn't recognize it. India also doesn't recognize it formally. So long and short is that China is a big player there. China has already been having these trilaterals, and we keep tracking China. Taliban has excellent relations with Turkey, especially after Erdogan. Turkey has also been trying to sort of expand its influence in the region. And if you go into the details, in my column also I've written a lot about what exactly Turkey does. Taliban have very good relations with Iran, okay? Taliban has good relations with Europeans. How? With respect to humanitarian assistance and stuff like that. Now, what I'm trying to say is that in this kind of a contested space, it doesn't make sense for India to get its hands dirtied, especially when it comes to military assistance. At least this is the formal part. Informally, whether there could be some covert, support or that kind of stuff. Now, obviously, that is something which I'm not privy to and something that we do not know. But as far as the formal part of it is, concerned, I don't see India really going that far. That is something important. And why do I always keep coming back to the China question is that please understand that China has not only invested heavily in Gwadar in Pakistan, China has also been trying to reduce Afghanistan's reliance on Karachi by connecting it to Gwadar. Okay. Please also not forget that China and Afghanistan also share an international border. It's called the Wakhan corridor. Okay, and there is some copper deposits there, etc. China has some plans, and if I read the Talibani mind properly, the Taliban is interested not in joining the Gwadar bandwagon because it sort of increases their dependence on Pakistan. What the Taliban are negotiating with China is that in the Wakhan corridor or wherever, they want to go solo with China so that they're able to develop complementarity. They don't want to develop more dependence. So it is a very fraught environment. And like I said, China and Iran and these factors and Turkey will always make sure that this particular problem doesn't spiral so out of control that it becomes a full-fledged war. Having said that, we will see more and more violence. I mean, if I'm not wrong, even after the big clash where Taliban said that they have killed 58 Pakistani troops and Pakistan claimed that they have killed 200. So whatever the numbers they have claimed, even after that, even right now, there's some low intensity skirmish happening. So that will continue. So India should step up engagement. India should have more strategic depth. But whether or not India should go to the extent of delivering arms, I don't think so. Taliban already has enough leftover arms from the American withdrawal. And you should know that Afghanistan is a major hub for all illegal Russian arms and Russian diesel and as well as, Iranian oil. So it's completely, it's already a very overcrowded, illegal shadow economy running there. So I honestly don't think India should be getting involved in that bit.
So, Swasti, did China then, with all these things, mediate between Afghanistan and Pakistan following the recent skirmish that happened across the border?
Well, that's good you asked me because, of course, China has been expressing its concern. But this time around, it was Qatar and Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Because, again, Qatar also has very, very important stakes in the region and a relationship with the region. So long and short is that you can see that it's a totally cluttered, environment. So India should be keeping its national interest first and not get entwined in the regional, geopolitics there.
And Swasti, since we are on the Pakistan-Afghanistan topic, our subscriber Ashish Dev Singh has a question where he asks that, do you see Pakistan offering Portland to the US for CPEC effectiveness? And more importantly, do you think Pakistan will be giving assistance to the US when it comes to Afghanistan?
Now, that's again a very interesting question. So, this port that Pakistan has recently offered to the United States, I think everybody should know, it is just 100 kilometers away from Gwadar. Okay, it's a small fishing village. It's called Pasni, and it's in the Arabian Sea. And why and where are things going from here? See, obviously, Pakistan wants to capitalize on the current high tide that it's riding with the Trump administration. Doesn't mean to say that America is going to, quickly jump into this invitation. Why? Because if that region was, or if that region had such great potential to grow, Gwadar would have been doing very well by now. And Gwadar has been a victim of overpromise and under-delivery. There are also attacks are reported on the Chinese personnel that are there. There are many problems. So Pakistan is not able to sort of get the same leverage that it imagined getting from Gwadar. The long game is still there, the investment is still there, but it's not really sort of bearing that fruit that everybody, at least those people, thought that they would. Now, as far as this latest one is concerned, again, if you go into the Pakistani literature on it, it would say that it's nothing new. We have been trying to develop it as a hub. It has a very small population, about I think 50,000, 70,000 people, and we have been trying to sort of offer it as a key hub, etc. Now, the current proposal right now doesn't include any military deployments. It is basically to develop more financial and logistical partnerships. I am not convinced really that United States really sees that kind of potential in it right now, especially considering that China's Gwadar has not been able to do very well. So I'm not completely convinced that it really sounds as great as it looks on paper right now. But having said that I do see where this is coming from and why Pakistan is trying to pitch the game. But with whether China is going to be happy with it, of course, that's another thing. Today, China is the key player in Pakistan and not the United States. So I think this has a long way to go.
And Swasti, the part about whether Pakistan will give assistance to the US when it comes to Afghanistan.
Now, very quickly, when it came to Afghanistan, and especially if you remember that recently Donald Trump himself said, right, this was not an offer that was coming from Pakistan or Afghanistan. Donald Trump himself said that he wants the Bagram Air Base back in order to sort of reassert a regional influence, etc. And that was a proposal which was opposed by everybody, including Pakistan. So I think there are serious limitations in terms of how the Pakistan, US, China, Afghanistan, Turkey, Iran, Qatar, Saudi Arabia angle plays out. It's a very, very dense region. But as far as this is concerned, it is not such a linear thing to understand. Just because Pakistan and the US are having a,
Moment
like
under
a
the sun.
moment, having their own moment under the sun, it doesn't mean that in all theaters it is going to reflect in the same way. So not like that.
With that, Swasti, we move on to another part of the world. And this is a question by Georges Sira, who first of all says that it's his favorite segment. So thank you for that. And he has a question on what do you make of North Korea's military parade where there were Chinese, Vietnamese, and the Russians in attendance recently?
So this military parade happened on the 10th of October, which is quite recent. And this was the 80th anniversary of the ruling Workers' Party of Korea. And why it sort of grabbed eyeballs was because of basically two things. One was that there was a delegation from China, from the Communist Party of China, with the Premier Li Kang, Russia with the former President Dmitry Medvedev. And Medvedev right now is the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council. And he was accompanied by two more guests. One was the Natural Resources Minister, Alexander Kozlov, and the other was the governor of the Kursk region. And the Kursk region is important here to underline because the North Koreans, when the first time they went to fight against Ukraine, they actually landed in the Kursk region because if you remember, Ukraine had sort of taken a bit of land from Russia in the Kursk region. So they had opened a front there. Them and then the Vietnamese, and the Vietnamese, it was basically the Communist Party chief of the from Vietnam. Now, there was some song and dances happening, and it was a lot of fanfare. But of course, the delegations, and the second was because they unveiled their latest intercontinental ballistic missile, which is being touted as the most advanced Hwasong-20, and this has been described as strongest nuclear strategic weapon that North Koreans have. Now, you should know that North Korea already has their nuclear arsenal has about 50 nuclear warheads, and they also have more material to sort of make some more. Now, that is the reason why every time North Korea unveils something like this obviously grabs everybody's eyeballs because at least on paper, the Hwasong-20 has very impressive strike capabilities. They can strike the US mainland wherever they want. Now, having said that, there are some problems with respect to how sophisticated it really is, or how sophisticated its guidance system would be, or what would be the durability of the warhead whenever it re-enters, because there's a re-entry mechanism that happens. So those kind of details we still have to see. And whenever they test it, I think they are going to be testing this now that they've unveiled, they'll probably test it towards the end of the year. But those are things that sort of makes everybody's head turns in terms of kya kar raha hai North Korea. Okay, but that's another part. Now, in terms of why it has strategic implications, is because please understand that the Korean Peninsula is existing in a state of a very fragile, balance for the last 72 years. Last 72 years, they've been existing in an armistice, okay? And the North Korean part of the Korean Peninsula is huddled with the Chinese, state, the Chinese part. And then there's a South Korean part, which is jutting out into the ocean. And that is where US has so many of these capabilities. Now, every time North Korea does something which significantly alters that balance of power is a problem for everybody. Don't be under the impression that China is very happy with what North Korea is doing. There is a kind of a sweeping generalization I see these days whenever everybody says, oh, the Krink axis, the China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, etc., which is like, the axis of upheaval and the axis of authoritarian states. Now, fine, I understand where this argument is coming from, but understand that when it comes to North Korea, all the military amalgamation and all the military cooperation that North Korea and Russia are having is not something which is liked by China, because that is China's backyard. Ukraine is not China's backyard. Okay, so North Korean troops going and fighting in Ukraine is not directly impinging upon what is happening in China's backyard. But China is extremely sensitive to anything that happens in its own backyard, and all this has an implication there. All this has an implication in Japan, because Japan finds itself, surrounded by countries like China, then Russia, then North Korea, and obviously that has also led to a kind of a transition in Japanese philosophy of military philosophy. So from passive deterrence, they have gone to proactive deterrence. And if you translate that into numbers, it basically means trillions of yen that they are now spending on, long range missiles, etc. And they're very, very serious. So that is the by and large implication and strategic implications of what happens when North Korea achieves this kind of a, weapon and this kind of a capability. It's less got to do with the fact that tomorrow they are going to launch that missile against the US. It's more got to do with the fact that it is significantly altering the balance in the Korean Peninsula, which is a very, very highly contested region otherwise. So that has implications for everybody, including for China.
Firstly, from there, a lot has been happening in France, and our subscribers, two of them actually, have a question on what basically is your opinion on France's revolving door on prime ministers.
Okay, so there are two countries for which the term revolving door is usually used when it comes to prime ministers. One is Japan, the revolving door of Japanese prime ministers, and right now it is now getting more and more applied in the case of France, where you see that prime ministers are not able to last. Now, the reasons are entirely different. The structure is entirely different. So the reasons why this is happening in Japan is completely different from why this is happening in France. And for that, let me just tell you a little bit, because of course, the reason is that the prime minister is tasked with basically pushing for a budget. And that budget is known as an austerity budget. Why? Because France has been facing a lot of economic turmoil for last many years. I mean, this hasn't come in last 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. This has been in making for many, many years. And now they have reached a situation where Emmanuel Macron, who is the president and who has the power to appoint prime ministers, is getting prime minister after prime minister. And the prime minister he gets, like whoever, XYZ, is being tasked with getting this budget passed. And because there is no majority in the parliament and no unanimity in the parliament when it comes to the budget, ultimately the prime minister has to go. So no matter how many prime ministers come, until the root problem is fixed, it is going to be the same. Now, this is the fundamental issue. Few more things you should understand about France. After the French Revolution, the French Revolution happened in 1789, okay? Liberty, equality, fraternity, the slogan, remember? After that, until now, France has seen almost 5 republics, okay? So 5 big political constitutional phases. And currently what we have in France is called the Fifth Republic, which came into being in 1958. After the war, France was into the Fourth Republic, from 1946 to 1958. And that was a system of parliamentary politics, okay? And that parliamentary politics was not working in the favor of, decisions getting passed, and that was very difficult to build consensus around issues. And as a result, and the crisis was so rampant and repetitive that in 12 years, between 46 to 58, they saw more than 24 governments. Okay, then to fix this particular problem, it was Charles de Gaulle who then put in place the Fifth Republic Constitution, where the system was changed from parliamentary to presidential or semi-presidential. So what you have right now is that under that, the Prime Minister is somebody who is appointed by the President, and President is the one that takes care of national security, foreign policy and defense. Okay, and because they had learned from the problems or the deadlocks of the Fourth Republic, how everything comes to a standstill when there is no consensus, therefore the Fifth Republic Constitution in France gave a special power to the French politics, and that special power is called the emergency article or the emergency provision called Article 49.3. Basically, what 49.3 does is that whenever there is an impasse, that if there is no majority in the lower house, the Prime Minister or the president, I mean, the French, policymakers still have the power to get that particular law passed by invoking this particular article. Now, before this revolving door had started, there was a relatively more stable French Prime Minister under Macron, Elizabeth Borne. Elizabeth Borne was there for about 1 year, 7 months. And in the 1 year, 7 months, she invoked Article 49.3 23 times. What it shows is, it's not the numbers, what it shows is that French politics is completely fractured and divided. They are not able to unanimously support or pass anything, especially when it comes to do with budget. And you may have heard that French politics and French economy is in a lot of trouble. Uska bhi bada important reason hai. When Macron became in 2017, he was liked and loved by so many, okay? And then when he came, first he said that I am now going to revive the economy by doing a lot of tax cuts. So he basically started lowering taxes from a lot of wealthy people, a lot of corporates, etc., okay? And of course, in some way it worked, but on the other hand, because the French state went on spending, basically they went on accumulating debt. And remember, Macron came in 2017. After some years, COVID came. Then Russia-Ukraine war came. So the spending has not stopped. But the money has not been able to get accumulated because the spending is only increasing. And right now they have they have a crazy high debt to GDP ratio now, so they have a lot of debt. That is the crux of the problem. Now, it's so dramatic that Macron appointed Sébastien Lecornu. Sébastien Lecornu was there only for 20-25 days. And just as he announced his cabinet, 14 hours before or, into that particular announcement, he resigned, right? But the more interesting thing came after that. Emmanuel Macron has reappointed Lecornu and re-given him the task of getting this budget pushed. Now, please understand, does it have implications for Macron? Technically speaking, it doesn't have implications for Macron because Macron's term is going to last until 2027, which is when the French are going to have the next presidential elections. Before that, because the French president has the power to appoint prime ministers, Emmanuel Macron is going on, on the spree of appointing prime ministers, where he's actually getting it wrong, and that is the important bit. What he's doing is that he is getting his loyalists. Sébastien Lecornu is also looked upon as a long-term ally, a long-term friend, confidant, and the others also that he's got. When he is able to see that the people's will is represented differently in the French parliament, In fact, when he called for a snap election in 2024, July, his party finished third. It was basically the far left and the far right. That were first and second. So basically the idea here to understand is that yes, Macron, it doesn't impact him technically, but it definitely is a big crisis for his political legitimacy. People do not want him. And this is people's way of telling him again and again that they want him to step down. Will he step down? I don't think so. But we will see more of these prime ministers coming and going. And ultimately, they have to really somehow make sure that the budget is passed. If the budget is not passed, then also there are certain emergency provisions that special provisions they are called, which means that then until 2026, they can continue with the rules they agreed upon until 2025. So there are certain provisions, through which they can run the government. But frankly, it's a crisis. And Macron should realize that the French people have voted against him. So he should step down, but he will not. That's a different thing, and maybe we can discuss it later. In terms of whether it has implications for India, it doesn't have implications for India directly because the weapons orders, etc., they don't change at all. Where you will see implications is where I've already noticed that the French Development Authority, the ADA, it's called the ADA, the French Development Authority, the Indo-Pacific programs, all of that will see major budget cuts because of all these problems, because the French economy has to be fixed. I mean, they are having, and it's bad news for Europe also, because the European engine is basically a Franco-German engine. So if one of the two largest economies and powers in Europe is having this kind of an impasse, okay, then it basically shows that it's a fractured leadership.
Moving on, Swasti, Narendra Arya has a question on BRICS, and he asks you that do you think the BRICS nation can make gold as a currency for trade in order to bypass the dollar?
Now, great question. But the only thing is that when you talk about the BRICS currency, first of all, India has not been on board and India will not be on board. Very quickly, I'll tell you why. The support for BRICS currency from India comes from a support for de-dollarization, because we would not like the United States to weaponize its dominance, its dollar dominance, to the extent that it becomes difficult for other countries like us, okay, to basically trade, because United States can put sanctions on someone and sanction someone else, and that becomes a problem. So as far as de-dollarization pertains to settling payments in local currencies, it has a strong logic, okay, and that should be encouraged. Now, whether it is the same as saying that the BRICS nations should be having a common currency, now these are two separate things. Because whenever you will have a BRICS common currency, it is going to be dominated by yuan, because China is disproportionately the biggest economy in the BRICS. Okay, China alone is bigger than the rest of the BRICS economies put together. Okay, please remember that. Now, your argument, Narendra ji, is that what if it is backed by gold? And you do see that many economies in the world right now are, like they're really sort of ramping up their gold reserves like crazy. Okay, China has been doing that as well. Now, as far as the gold-backed currency is concerned, only a part of that currency is going to be gold backed. The rest of it is going to be determined by the fiscal, financial health, or power prowess of your currency. So ultimately, whether you approach it directly or indirectly, it is going to be dominated by the yuan. And from India's perspective, de-dollarization would make sense only if it is leading to rupeeization. De-dollarization does not make sense if it leads to strengthening the grip of that de-dollarized rate for yuan. So de-dollarization should not be yuanization. And why should India push for these things? So I don't see that happening, at least right now, and I don't see that happening at least till the time that the asymmetry between India and Chinese economy continue to be the manner, and continue to be what they are. Until then, I don't see the Indian government pushing for any kind of common BRICS currency. Remember, BRICS does not have any geopolitical alignment. BRICS does not have any economic alignment. BRICS does not have any military alignment. BRICS is simply a grouping of countries that are not classic West. That's what it is. So So we should also be sort of coming out of this sometimes, this habit of thinking of it as anything that is happening in the non-Western sphere is going to be good. It may not be good for us, like I just mentioned, and that is the reason why Dr. Jaishankar has come on board several times saying that there will not be a BRICS currency, not at this stage at least.
Swasti, before we end this, one final question, and that is by Venkat Bharat Reddy, who wants to know that do you think Russia will be able to win this war?
Oh, now Russia-Ukraine war has not turned out as per the expectations of the rest of the world. I have gone on record many times saying that when the war began, at that time I was still working for the MOD think tank called Institute for Defense Studies and Analyses, where I was working at the European Center, and me and my colleagues were tasked with this project of telling the Prime Minister's office how long the war is going to go and what are the implications going to be. And all our assessments were proven wrong. We had argued that this war, there is no way under the sun that Ukraine would have the might to sort of win, no, not just win, even stand. Stand against a mighty military such as Russia. The sanctions would not work, and Russia would find a way to sort of circumvent those sanctions, etc. The West solidarity would not be able to sort of last so long because democracies are fragile, and this is what Putin has in mind. So all of our assessments, which we had given in that report, were proven wrong. And that is why, if you ask me, I have been sort of arguing several times now that it is not possible for Russia to win this war militarily. If it was possible for Russia to win this war, Russia would have won this war. Okay, we have seen many phases of ups and downs and everything, but as far as the latest is concerned, Russia's summer offensive has not worked. In fact, in Europe, it is referred to as the 1+1 dilemma, which is that Russia has been able to only take 1% of Ukrainian land in the last 1000 days, and it has lost about 1 million people. Okay, and this is now something which Donald Trump is alluding to again and again. Right now, Pete Hegseth is in Ramstein. Ramstein is where the Defense Contact Group meeting used to happen. When Donald Trump first came, he said, "Band karo Ramstein ki dukaan." Now Pete Hegseth is there. Now all this reversal that you see in Donald Trump's attitude is also coming from the fact that Donald Trump can see that this war is not going to end, and this is a golden opportunity for him to now keep selling weapons to Ukraine. So as you can see, he's not only selling those weapons to Ukraine, which are footed by the bill for which is voted by Europeans, but he's also removing restrictions. Okay, so Ukraine is now allowed to strike deeper into Russian territory, which the Biden administration did not allow it for. So what I'm trying to say is that, to your question, when will this war end? Nobody really knows the answer to that, because the war is going to go, at least in its current form, it can go on for another year. Ukraine has already developed the most state-of-the-art drones, and they have also deployed those drones in combination with their, ammunition and artillery brigades in a manner which is rather unprecedented. Okay, and that is the reason why they're able to withstand the pressure. As far as Russia is concerned, Russia is also having immense capabilities to withstand losses. Russia's major problem is going to be coming from their economy, because this entire narrative of the Russian economy doing well is not a real correct narrative. The Bank of Russia has worked very, very well. In fact, they are the real heroes, honestly, because the military part has not been able to win it, on the battlefront. But the Bank of Russia has done some very, very clever things. But the issue is that if there are problems when it comes to, I'll tell you where the real issue is now. If you've noticed, in the last 2 months alone, Ukraine has been hitting the Russian refineries every single day. And Russia has not been able to protect their refineries, okay? And in the last 2 months alone, now Russia is, 30% of Russia's oil refining capabilities are now under duress and trouble. Now, you can say, sitting in India, that this can be propaganda, right? Because such kind of propaganda is also always making rounds. It is not propaganda, because the gasoline prices are going very high in Russia. And Russia has already told, its refiners that they have put export restrictions. They have told them, we are not going to be exporting them. In fact, for the first time, oil-rich regions such as Russia is now importing refined oil from China and Belarus. Okay, so things are not going fine, because oil and gas is the main thing. Russia has massive reserves, but Russia must do something about every single day the attacks by Ukrainian drones on their refineries. It's not really propaganda. It's very serious, because you can totally see that impacts are seen almost immediately, now. So that is what Russia has to make sure. Russia has to make sure that it finishes the war as soon as possible. They should be deploying all their military strength, and they should be trying to finish this war. If it doesn't happen like that, this is going to go in for a very long haul, because Ukraine has capabilities. They have also shown a lot of resilience, and even if a ceasefire was called, let's say, between Donald Trump and Putin or somebody, but the war is going to go on in the guerrilla form. So it is again going to be problematic. So the best case scenario is that there has to be either a decisive military victory or a decisive military defeat. And both these scenarios do not look very probable. So this war is going to go on.
With that, we come to the conclusion of this episode. Stay tuned for another fresh episode, and we look forward to your questions. Thank you.